Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Just give us a few minutes. We'll just wait for some other people to join in. Thank you so much. And while we are waiting for some of the other people to join, I'd like to introduce you to Devi. Devi, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
So Devi is an old colleague, and we worked together for a brief period in time when I was at Harappa, and Devi was also there, and then I had moved out, and Devi, for a very short period of time before he moved to Canada, was actually one of the key people who was also working on how to set up the AMP. And I know this would be something very special for many of our AMP learners. I'm Ankit, Devesh, Dharyash, all of you who are here. So Devi, before we begin, tell us some inside gossip about how did you sort of put the AMP, and many of them are also very, very troubled by IPJ. So do tell us, how did that decision happen? And very quickly, in a few minutes, I think we should be ready to start in a minute or two.
So yeah, thank you, Seema, for the introduction and having me for this session. So yeah, I mean, the AMP program was a very ambitious program for us. We wanted to do world's best MBA program. So we wanted to have a lot of blended elements into the program, where live sessions, recorded videos, assignments. So there were a lot of things that we wanted to add, but because of short timeline, we were considering whether we could use our existing features that we already have, and we had to do quick R&D on what features can be included from the day one and what can be added later. So a lot of we also thought of considering other platforms like outsourcing to the vendor and all, but all would have taken more time to get this amazing program started, right? So we had to take that tough call to cut down some features and go live, go to market as quickly as possible, right? So yeah, I mean, we already had that existing platform and we had to use it. That was the start.
So I think we should be ready to begin. For all of you who have joined a minute back, just wanted to introduce you to Devi. Devi has been working as a product lead at Harappa and elsewhere for a long time. And Devi also comes with a background of having been a Teach for India fellow. Devi is very, very passionate about learners and how we can make sure that, learners get the best possible thing that they can. For engagement, for making sure things are working for them. And also, how do we always find out if we're actually leaving the impact that we are supposed to? Devi introduced many, many new features and lots of new tools and technology and other things in Harappa. And I've seen that because Harappa was really at, when we started out, Devi was one of the first people who came in. And I remember he brought in HubSpot, which at that point in time, 4 years ago, was like this magic thing from which you could send out emails and other things, and it was fantastic. So yeah, my journey about learning a little about product and how you sort of plan, everything comes from Devi. And so I mean, very, very delighted to invite him, so that he's going to be able to sort of talk about customer engagement, in our case, learner engagement. How do you keep them and keep them coming back? And that's something Devi worked very, very hard at Harappa, and I'm sure whatever else he's doing now. So Devi, the floor is with you. Guys, the format of this session is Devi will be making a presentation. He will be talking to you. And since it's mostly cohort people, what we will do is when you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, or you can put them in the Q&A chat. And at some point, I will make sure that if I'm able to unmute you, I will unmute you and allow you to answer your question yourself. So Devi, welcome and look forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Seema, for the introduction, and thank you guys for joining. I know it's late evening, not very late, but still it's a evening, and I appreciate you guys taking time to join. So let's quickly start. Let me share my presentation. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So hope you guys can see my screen. Yes. Okay.
Yes, Devi.
Okay. So what we really going to discuss today is how to drive engagement in the product. If you ever become a product manager, or if you're a marketer, or if you are a customer success manager, what really drives business is the engagement, right? If people don't use your product, or if they are not actively coming back to your platform, then the business is going to struggle or survive. So engagement is always the core of any product management, or for marketing as well. So this is one topic that interests me. So the session agenda would be these 5 things. One, just brief introduction about myself, which is already done. Second is how our mind works. So to do any kind of engagement, we need to understand how our mind works. So without understanding how people take decisions, how people are motivated, what are the biases, cognitive biases that we have, without that, it's very difficult to design any product or do any behavior change, right? So we'll briefly talk about the behavior design, and also some gamification techniques that motivate us, and finally a Q&A. So that would be a brief agenda. Yeah, so I'm going to skip this part since we already discussed this. So most of my learnings from this session are from the time I worked at Harappa. So since it's a learning platform, and a lot of people know that we innately love or enjoy learning, but we always fall short of taking some actions towards learning, or fall short of, there's always this intention versus action gap when it comes to learning, or when it comes to health, right? We always intend positive benefits, but we never take that steps. So gamification or behavioral principle rightly applies in learning platforms, especially, or in fitness applications, where the motivation is high, but the actions we don't take sometimes, right? So one of the key achievements in Harappa was to drive completion. So you might have come across a lot of learning platforms, but completion is always a challenge. And using some of these principles and techniques, we were able to achieve a very good completion rates of 60% or so, 60 to 65% for a lot of our cohorts. So moving on, so how does our mind work? So there are a few things that we need to keep in mind, like how does our mind work? First of all, we we are limited beings. We are limited by our attention span. We are limited by the time and the willpower we have. So in this age of information overload, a user, if you think from a user point of view, user could be paying attention to many things at once. So it's fair to assume that when your user is using your app, it need not be necessary that they are focusing or paying attention to only your product, right? So, or your email communication, whatever is you're trying to engage with, right? So we are limited in that sense. The second is you can think our mind as there are two parts, like we are of two minds. Think of our mind as a rider sitting on an elephant. That is the perfect analogy if you have to imagine your mind, right? So the rider always thinks that he is in control of things, but many times the elephant is taking the decisions intuitively. So there are always two minds. One is the conscious thought that we deliberately do, and the second part is the non-conscious reactions that we do, like habits, right? And third thing is our mind uses shortcuts, always uses shortcuts to optimize its energy or economize and make quick decisions because of these limitations, right? So our mind tries to always minimize the energy and then take, these are called heuristics also. So this is something we're going to talk in detail. And the last thing is our mind is deeply affected by the context, right? So every person behaves differently based on what context they are in. It is impacted by the social environment, the people they talk to, they listen to. It is also impacted by the physical environment, the things that they see and react to, interact with, or it is also impacted by their mental environment, which is what they have learned in the past, what are their habits and what are their beliefs. So no individual can behave exactly same for a same question or a response or a situation. So moving on. So if you can think of our mind being on a spectrum, based on how much thought is involved, right? So this could be a spectrum. One end of the spectrum is when very frequently repeated low stake decisions like eating potato chips out of a bag, right? So it's a very common behavior that we have done it multiple times, no stakes involved, right? So there is no thinking involved in that, and we just act automatically, and that is what is behavior, right? So that is this habits, sorry. So that is what we call as habits, right? There is a cue, there is some routine you follow, and then there is some reward that you get. It's completely familiar situation and no thought process involved, right? The second thing is little familiar situation, little bit of thinking is involved, limited thinking is involved, and our mind heavily relies on the shortcuts to make the best of our limited faculties, right? Heuristics, these are called heuristics, and basically they are mental rules that we have set in our head. Like example would be just choosing a restaurant which is quite popular, or where you have heard, or where there is a lot of crowd, is one of the heuristic, which is called social proof, right? So that is one example. Valuing something in the present over instant gratification, for example, right? Something if you are getting now, you will value that more than something that you value later. So that is called present bias, right? So those are the heuristics. And the last part is the conscious part, where the situation is completely unfamiliar and you had to do intense thinking, like solving a math puzzle or making a meal plan for a family, right? So that is a broad spectrum of how our mind works. So let's now move to what is behavioral design, and how do we approach this. So it's an art of problem solving problem approach that uses insights from the field of behavioral economics to develop and design solutions that change behavior, right? So we are borrowing some concepts from behavioral economics to solve a problem and ultimately change the design. That is what behavioral design is. And we all have to admit behavioral change is hard, right? They often fail for predictable reasons. Again, the main word here is predictable reasons, right? And we humans don't always act in our best interest, right? So the three key elements of behavior change is this 3B framework. So let's go through this framework. First is behavior. So if you have to change any behavior, first step is to identify what is that desired behavior and outline every step your user has to take to achieve it, right? You have to be very specific about which behavior you would like to change, and then outline every step that the user has to take or a person has to take in order to complete that behavior, right? So identifying that is the first step. Second step is barriers, right? So once you outline the behavior and steps involved to achieve that behavior, you then identify the barriers. So barriers are all the friction that get in a way of decision. So a barrier could be a simple decision making, or it could be a action a person has to take. So anything, any effort from the user is called a barrier. And finally, the benefit, right? So determining what are the benefits and how can those benefits motivate people is the third part. So these three elements form this framework called 3B framework, which we can use for behavioral design. Let's take an example. So for example, let's say a key behavior. First thing is the key behavior has to be specific. It should be measurable. And like, for example, outcome can't be a behavior. So losing 10 pounds can't be a behavior. So it has to be very specific. Like in this example, for people that purchased a smart yoga mat, is to try it for at least 10 minutes within 5 days of arrival, right? So something specific like this is the first step in identifying the key behavior. So what are the questions you have to ask? Like who are the key users first, who you are trying to change the behavior? What are the most important user actions you're trying to change or to meet the user or business goal? Like in this case, the people who recently purchased the smart yoga mat, right, is our audience. And second, what are we trying to change? Trying to make them use it for at least 10 minutes. And when and how often should users do this behavior, right? Within 5 days of arrival. And the last option, where it's optional again, where should the behavior take place, right? So these are the 4 key questions you should answer, your key behavior should answer. And the most important step is we should seek data. Like if you don't have data to back this, to measure this behavior, right, or to track this behavior, then it would be very difficult to do any kind of experiment or also change the behavior, right, or plan any kind of behavior change. So most important, and a lot of times this could be one of the big challenge that you might come across, where there is no data available for a particular behavior you are willing to change, right? So first step is collect data about the problem, right? Next, moving to the second B, that is barriers. So barriers are all are points of friction, right? They all slow us down, and there are 2 types of barriers. One is logistical barrier and the psychological barrier. Like for example, if you have to decide which restaurant to go for a dinner, then that's a psychological barrier, because you have to think which is the best restaurant, and there are a lot of decision-making process involved. And by so if you have to walk, so once you decide the restaurant, then you have to walk or drive to the restaurant. That's a logistical barrier that you have to overcome. So there are two types of barriers. So some of the common barriers that I have come across, or you can also come across, are these. So first is the attention bias, right? So the world is busy and overloaded, and our attentional resources are extremely limited. We can only focus on limited number of things at a time, right? So which means important details can be missed, right? So this can be a big barrier. Like some of the biases that come into play is availability bias, or salience bias, or informational avoidance, right? So this could be one of the common barrier. Second is again cognitive overload. We are wired to limit our cognitive effort, right? So we are wired to limit, so minimize or optimize for a cognitive effort. So when given any complex set of choices, we kind of tend to procrastinate or opt out of taking action altogether, right? So whenever there is a big form that you have to fill, or let's say you have to take an important decision, so sometimes we don't have enough information or confidence to take that. So we either procrastinate it or not at all take decision at all, right? So that is one of the common behavior. And the other common barriers is status quo, which means we have a natural bias towards the present state of affairs, right? And often view change from the status quo as a loss. Like whenever we want to change something that is normal, we always see that as a loss. So that is one of the common barriers. Again, common example is, let's say if you have to resell your clothes, and you don't know the value of your clothes now. So what you tend to do is just, the status quo is not do anything, right? Just keep it lying in the wardrobe, right? So one of the common behavior again. And the last thing is the mental models. So our preconceived notion of how things work or our beliefs can bias our actions and social behaviors, right? So for example, if a company is offering an online therapy, right? And a lot of people can have this negative stigma around therapy or counseling, and people don't sign up for it, right? So that is one common mental model because of their beliefs, because of their preconceived notions. They chose to decide against what is best in their interests, right? And the last part of this framework is barriers. How do you reduce barriers? Still talking about the barriers itself. So how do you so there are two ways. Either you remove them entirely or just simplify the decision-making process, right? Once you identified what are the barriers that you want to work on, prioritize them, and then either you try to remove them entirely or you simplify the decision-making process. So one example I can remember from my experience at Harappa is whenever the user had to start a course, we have something called pre-assessment in our course, and there was an open text field question that was asked in the assessment, and a lot of people struggled to fill that. So we removed kind of open text field question and made it into a multiple choice question, and we saw a huge improvement in our course starts. It went up to 40%, went up by 40%. That is one way to remove the barrier itself. The other common example that comes across is an option called guest checkout, right? So whenever you're trying to book flights or any ticket, right? So there is always an option called guest checkout, which means you skip all the sign up process and let the users continue their booking, right? So that is one more way to remove the barrier completely. Now, the other ways to simplify the decision is like one broad idea is to refocus the attention, which means highlighting few things. Like if there are multiple choices and you can easily say this is recommended, highly recommended, or you can compare the choices or with other choices, right? You can say this is the most popular choice that people have chosen, or you can say best option, right? So that is one way to compare. The other way is to remind, like if people have to take an action and sometimes they forget, so you can send a timely reminder that can also refocus their attention. So these are common things that can simplify the decision. So last part of the framework, that is amplify the benefits. So while barriers add friction and removing barriers will make it easy, but sometimes it's always important to motivate also. So benefits are something that motivate users, even though there are barriers, but if they see there is a benefit, then they are motivated to overcome that barrier and complete that key behavior, right? So there is a slight difference between removing the barriers and amplifying the benefits. So removing barriers is you are removing friction. Amplifying benefits is where you are improving or increasing the motivation of the users, right? And some benefits, and there are different types of benefits, right? Some benefits can happen immediately. For example, if you go and buy a lottery, right? You buy a lottery, you can scratch immediately and you know what the value of that is immediately, right? You don't have to wait. Some benefits can happen in the future. Example could be investments, right? You make an investment today, but the value of that can be reaped later in the future, right? And some benefits are very functional, which is extrinsic in nature, like money or any goods that you purchase. But some benefits are emotional or intrinsic to our nature, right? Status, recognition, autonomy, mastery, or purpose, right? So these are very intrinsic to our behavior, and there are different types of benefits, right? So if you look at this graph, right? So on the x-axis, we have the timeline of when the value can be realized, and the y-axis is what kind of benefit is it? Is it intrinsic or extrinsic, right? The functional means extrinsic and intrinsic is emotional, right? So we want our users to be on the top right. If they are in the bottom left, then it's going to be an uphill battle. But this is where we should make our users be, right? We should. This is what we have to strive for. The top right. Okay. So again, benefits. So coming to the gamification framework, this framework is based on the idea that there are 8 core drives that motivate people to engage in activities, right? So by designing experiences that tap into these core drives, we can create more engaging and effective products. So what are these core drives? And these can be mapped to the popular psychological theory, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So we all have needs and wants, and this is the pyramid, and our 8 core drives can be mapped to these pyramid. So moving on into each of the core drives. So first core drive is epic meaning or calling, right? So this can be linked to a behavioral science principle of purpose. So people are motivated when they feel that they are doing something greater than themselves, or where they are trying to achieve a bigger purpose. Like for example, Wikipedia, or a lot of open source projects, right? That people contribute to. so they feel this sense of heroism, or you can, how this can play in the product design is you can have a very nice narrative when they are onboarding, right? Or giving them some higher meaning by completing a certain behavior. That is how we can use this code drive to motivate people. Again, second, code drive can be linked to the behavioral science principle of goal setting or progress. Like people are motivated by the sense of progress or accomplishment, and that is this is the common gamification technique people use, like points, badges, progress bar, and if not entirely, but you can use bits and pieces of this in any product design. Like for example, profile completion is a popular way LinkedIn has used this code drive to improve their profile completion rates, and you can see the examples here. The third code drive is empowerment of creativity and feedback. So this code drive addresses or is linked to the bias called autonomy. Lot of people are motivated by the sense of autonomy or self-expression. People are motivated when they have the freedom to express themselves and receive recognition for their ideas, right? So a lot of games also, if you consider, right, if you have a way to make a decision and apply some of your creative mind in action, then those are the games that are more engaging. Counter example would be like a snake and ladder, where you don't have to apply your brain or anything. It's just a chance. People are not very engaged while playing those games, right? But some of the games where you have to make like chess, right? You have to make a strategic decisions. Your creativity comes into play. So those are the games that are people engaged because their creativity and feedback is in action. Yeah, and the next core behavior is ownership and possession. So some examples are again note taking, right? So in Harappa also we have a feature called note taking. So if people spend some time on the app and create notes and they value it more. And for example, playlist, creating a playlist in any of your favorite music app. So people are motivated when they have a sense of ownership over something and feel in control of it. So the best way to use this in product design is to help them customize their profile or help them customize their app completely look and feel, right? So one of the popular bias here is IKEA effect, which is like when you buy any furniture from IKEA, you put in that effort to assemble it, so you value it more. So that code that motivates people to take actions. The next one is again very, very, very popular: social influence and relatedness, right? So this drive can be linked to the behavioral science of social proof. People are motivated by social connections and the desire to be part of a group or a community, right? So a lot of examples of social proof, like in e-commerce, or if you look at any booking.com, right? So you see this small messages or prompts that say these many people have already booked from this restaurant. Or if the other common example is gifting or reciprocity. So one example that I at Harappa also witnessed is when we started creating these nudges, this report kind of nudges, where we told how many minutes you have spent on our platform, how much progress you have done. People started coming back to our platform more often than people who didn't receive this kind of report, right? So that is again very common code drive. And the next one is the scarcity and impatience, like sense of urgency. So this code drive can be linked to the behavioral science principle of scarcity. So people are motivated when they feel that something is in short supply, or it's very limited, or it's very exclusive. Then people are motivated to act upon it, or if there is any sense of urgency. Like a lot of deals that you see have a timeline. And a lot of booking, again, booking.com is a very good example here. They display this short message saying only few rooms are available in a particular restaurant. That just motivates people to take action. And the next one is the unpredictability and curiosity. I'm sure this you must have seen in action in many of the payment apps. A lot of apps now give you this scratch card, and people value it. Even gambling is one main example of how our unpredictability and curiosity drive is in action. People are just motivated by the sense of curiosity or a desire to explore new things, right? Even Cred app uses this extensively to engage their people. And the last one is the loss and avoidance, right? So people are motivated to avoid negative consequences and not miss out on something important, right? So these are the common code drives. So just showing an example of how you can put this in action. So let's say you have identified the key behavior that you have to change. Then the next step is to map out the behavioral journey. So let's say starting point is smart yoga mat arrives at the door, and then you put the action. So you open the box and you also write down what are the steps, sub actions needed to do that action, right? You get the Caesar, look at the packaging, take out contents, and then you look at the quick start instructions, and then you download the app. So to download the app, what are the sub actions you need to take? You have to grab a phone, open the app store, search for the yoga mat. And here you can think of the barrier, right? What is the barrier? Here there is a logistical barrier where they have to do these multiple steps. How can you avoid? Maybe when someone purchases the app or the yoga mat, they can just get an SMS link directing them to download the app, right? That's another one way to remove all these steps, right? So this is one example where you map out all your actions and ask questions where the barriers could be and how can you remove them, or where can the benefits can be amplified, right? So I can share this link in the chat for you guys to refer. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you, Devi. And yes, I think it would help if you're able to share this deck with our cohort members and they are able to sort of, go through it. I have a few questions that have started coming in. And the first one is from Sudhanshu. Sudhanshu is one of our AMP members, and I'm going to let Sudhanshu ask his question. Sudhanshu?
Yes. Hi, first of all. Hi, Devi. Hi, Seema. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes. So my question was that is procrastination not itself being in the status quo itself, that you are procrastinating and not coming out of the status quo. So how does this two become a different barriers, as you were telling, out of the 4 barriers that you were telling?
So status quo, how can it be a barrier, you're saying?
No, what I meant to ask means procrastination. When we procrastinate, we are putting ourselves in a status quo. We are not changing our state, right? So how does these two become 2 different barriers? instead of being in one? As you said, these two are the different barriers out of the four: cognitive and status quo.
I mean, status quo is slightly different. Of course, there are a lot of overlaps in these barriers, right? It's not like a mutually exclusive or exhaustive list. Definitely, there is an overlap, but this barrier, you have to just ask these questions, right? Is it easy for people to switch, right? This question can help you identify whether they have this status quo barrier or not, right? And there is an overlap. It's not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you.
So there's another question. I'm not sure who's asking this, but they want to know, why do we need to write the sub steps? I think this was when you were. This is more to do with sort of our logic tree, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you write the sub steps, right, it will be clear how many action or decisions the user have to make, right? Otherwise, you might think downloading an app is a simple step, right? But if you write that sub steps, it is very clear how many frictional points are there. Like, you have to take the phone, you have to search for the app. You might not find the app in the app store sometimes, right? And then you might have to download it. So it just gives you more clarity on the steps and potential friction that the user can face just by writing the sub steps.
Okay, so we have Dhariyesh. Dhariyesh, I'm going to unmute you and you can ask the question yourself. Just give me a minute. Dhariyesh is also from AMP. He's part of the second batch and he runs his own, or he's part of a, Dhariyesh, just explain to Devi what you do first.
Hey, hi Devi. Thanks a lot for this insightful session. So basically, I run a small startup. So basically, we are into air wellness space, and we make cost-effective air purifiers. And the way we do is we don't take the traditional approach of just selling air purifiers. The way we do is we educate people first of all, because this is like something you need to build a category. I mean, this you can. If you were to take an analogy, like you can think of air purifier as something like water purifier, like probably 10 years back, a decade back, it used to be luxury back then. But now if you see that everybody, like in even like tier 2, tier 3 towns, they already have water purifier now. So we are using a similar approach. So that's about me. Actually, I have a question because I don't know anything about the product design. This is something really new for me. So what really intrigued me today is that, especially in the IPGA platform, whenever you watch a recorded video or even in a Thriver City, if the video is automatically playing, and in case you switch the tab, like you want to check your email or you want to switch the window, I noticed the video, it gets automatically paused. So I think this is a very good design feature. In terms of, basically you don't have to like go back, scroll 10 second, 15 second. So I'm trying to understand like what's the thought process behind, this particular feature. I mean, I'm talking specifically in terms of product design.
Yeah, again, right. So sometimes barriers are also helpful, to be honest, right? So to improve the outcome of our courses, we realize that people need to pay that extra attention, and they can't be learning by doing something else on the side, right? So we wanted to make sure their attention is there and focus, they continue learning. And we have done this experiment also where we allow people to continue watching the video while doing something else, but some people can only watch the video when they are on that tab. And we saw, so right after the video, there are some exercises that comes up and people have performed very well in those exercises. They are able to recollect the concepts and they are able to remember the concepts when they are focused on completing.
Okay.
So although the engagement might be a problem, you might not see a lot of people completing the course because of this barrier, but the outcomes were very high in those cases. So we were trying to optimize the outcome there, not the engagement so much.
So I was thinking, I think it's more of a like amplifying benefit rather than the barrier.
Yeah.
So
yes,
is it like an overlap? I mean, it's like it falls into both category, like behavior.
Yeah, I mean, there is an overlap, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, removing some frictions can definitely help people to take actions, but motivating people is also one way to help people take actions. And of course, there are some overlaps in between benefits and barriers. So there is no like hard and fast rule what falls under barrier and what is a benefit.
Got it. Okay. Maybe one last quick question. I mean, what's the best way to get started with product design? I know we will have a separate track, but is there something, we all can do so that we could at least have sort of, good basic understanding before the track starts?
So I would say just download as many apps as possible and just understand the design or the experience, how people have built it. Like we are used to using multiple apps and subconsciously we take a lot of actions. But the first step for any product design is to appreciate the journey, right? The design. So when let's say you take Uber or any common app that you just sit down and see at what points, what decision you are taking and how the product features are helping you to make that decision. Just break it down, right? Breaking it down step by step is the first step of any product design. And the best way to do is take very popular apps, take screen by screen, see what you are seeing and what decisions you have to make and how that screen is helping you to make that decision, right? So that is the first step to do. Take popular apps, take screen by screen approach and see what you see and how it's helping you to make the decisions. That would be the first step.
Yeah. Thanks, Devi.
Thanks, Aryash. Devi, I'm bringing in Shilpi, and I'll let her answer ask her question. Just give me a second. Go ahead, Shilpi.
Hi Devi and hi Seema. I'm also a part of AMPLIFY 2 cohort 2 and love the work that you all have done with the product of Harappa. I kept telling them even on the mixer on 19th. My question actually is about the fact that in the user buyer journey, how to kind of reduce a user's cognitive overload, specifically when they have to make limited thinking decisions. Like, when the product's price is probably like an investment or it's on a higher range. Day-to-day utility items, of course, have less cognitive load. There's a retention journey of its own for not just the product, but also the user. I want to understand when it's for high range products, something which is higher than 500 rupees, something that a user will not buy every month or something like that. Like, how do you reduce that cognitive overload then? And I ask this in the context because the present day user, has now started asking that their journey should be less anxiety inducing, that they really hate the overload that comes from the digital interfaces. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so one is understanding the cognitive overload in depth, right? So by asking some questions, right? So for example, if they have to make a purchase of, let's say, 10,000 rupees or higher, right? So what could be the possible barriers, right? One is they don't want to pay it upfront. So the EMI concept is something that is being very popular these days, giving an option to pay in EMIs, right? That can help them to take that decision, or amplifying the benefits, right? Again, here some of the core drivers like social influence, how many people have benefited out of this, or giving the instant value maybe you can say you can pay now, but use now, buy now, but pay later kind of concepts have come into play, right? So look at the root cause of that cognitive overload, and see which of the core drivers you can use. And a lot of this is again experimental, right? So there is no one right answer for this. In this process, you have to first hypothesize something, design a solution, maybe come up with 2-3 solutions once you identify that problem, and then also run an experiment which has more impact. I would say it's not a straightforward answer to it. There's no straightforward answer to it. You might have to do some experiment and arrive to a proper answer based on what the root cause of the problem is.
Thank you for that.
Devi, there's an interesting question from Olivia. She's also part of our second cohort. And Olivia, I'll just quickly ask that because it's a simple question. She wants to know, why did Harappa choose to create a LMS like Thriversity instead of outsourcing it, it to another platform which was already ready?
Yeah, I mean,
were you involved with Thriversity?
Yeah, I mean, I was involved in Thriversity. The thing about Thriversity is we see our strength was in the design, right? So we have to sometimes take decision based on our strengths as well. So as Harappa, we are very strong on content and design, and we want to have control on how the user experiences the platform. And in the past as well, when we outsource something, it always came with some limitations of what we wanted to do. So there were we in the past we built a dashboard for our partners, for our clients, and that part we have outsourced it. And when we have to redesign it, there were a lot of constraints, or few things were not even possible to do. So we wanted to have that control or flexibility to change or design that experience. And since our strength is also in content and design of how the platform can be built, so we hence chose to do our own rather than outsourcing it.
Okay, because there are many questions, I thought I'll just ask them myself, and so that we can move ahead quickly. This is Saurabh Chaube and wants to know, what do you think, how an app can have a better user retention, or what might be the solution to have more stickiness for users of an app? There is always a major drop in users coming back to the app, especially in the early days.
Yeah, again, I would say the first step is to collect the data, right? If you don't have data about what key behaviors your users are using, then the first step for you is to add those. So there is something called event taxonomy. You can search it in Google also, where as a product manager, you can choose what events to track and what to track also, like what behavior to be tracked, and within that behavior, what specific information you want to track, right? So first step is to do that. Make sure you collect the data as much as possible. And once you have the data, then you see which behavior is impacting the most, like where the drop-off is most. Like, is it while signing up, or is it while starting a course? Let's say if it's learning product, right? So we saw there is a lot of drop-off, huge percentage of drop-off when starting a course, right? So we identified that as a key behavior that we want to change. And then we really went deep into what are the actions and what thought process the user might go through when taking this decision. Let's say course start. And then really think of the barriers that the users are facing and what value or what benefits we can amplify. So really identifying the key behavior is the first step. And for that, I think collecting the data is the crucial step there.
All right, this is Raj. He's from our first cohort. Raj wants to know how to implement this framework that you've talked about efficiently on Facebook ads. He says there's a lot of competition and users have very less attention on those ads these days. So is there any framework that one can use for performance marketing? Or will this framework help us to identify which ads will do better on Facebook?
Again, I would say I'm not so much experienced with performance marketing, but I have seen a lot of behavior change when you play with the copy, right? The tagline, the heading of the message or the content. So one of the popular framework I have seen in place framing something, right? So people take decisions based on the context, right? So for example, let's say when we started the headlines or the email communication that we were sending to our learners by saying 10 ways you can get promoted or 5 ways you can give feedback, right? So that number in the headline itself played a huge role. People tend to click that kind of copy or headline more often than a very generic thing. And we also saw question kind of headlines which have question in them is more attractive for the users. And we also experimented by adding some emojis to the headlines, right? So in my experience, I have seen adding emojis, small emojis, brought that attention and provoked users to click on that ad. So these were some of my learnings from email marketing. Not sure I've used Facebook performance marketing so much, but these are my learnings.
Okay, and last final question. This is from Yuvika. She's also part of our first cohort and has been very, very active in many, many things that the course is doing. She wants to know, how does one overcome your own biases when you're on the journey to discover products and manage product management and product discovery?
So first thing is to understand that biases are not bad always, right? So it's good, like it helps your brain to ease or optimize the energy, right? So sometimes biases are good, but you have to just recognize when the biases are not helping you, right? And the important thing there is to seek help, I would say. So whenever you have a chance to get it reviewed, like any kind of decision you are taking, right? Be conscious of that decision. And let's say it's very important and you recognize the importance of a particular thing, and you can verify it with other people or seek suggestions from others. That always helps. But it really depends on the situation and context. But again, it's not always bad. Biases are always sometimes helpful also.
All right. Thank you so much, Devi. We're almost at time. If there's any last question, we're happy to take that. But otherwise, thank you. I hope this was useful. Devi, will you share your deck with us so that we can share it with our cohort members? And
yeah, I just shared the link in this.
That's the Miro one, right?
Yeah, there's a Miro one. There you have deck, step by step.
Yeah. But the deck also that you were presenting, and so that we can share it with them in a consistent way, so they're able to sort of use that. But thank you, everyone. And if you ever have a question or you want to reach out, Devi is one of our own, and he's absolutely available to help us. We are absolutely thrilled to have you, Devi. Thank you so much. And all right. So
thank you, everyone, for
here. Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.